You're riding on the back of your friend's motorcycle, and you feel fear even on the slightest curve, one you'd normally never be afraid of while riding, even if they're a better rider than you. You probably think this is because you're not in control. That's not entirely wrong, but it's incomplete. What if I told you that this is actually a much deeper issue, one that affects the way you perceive time? We'll get to that at the end of the video. But first, let's start with how your mind tricks you while riding a motorcycle. 1. You're riding an illusion. You're in an illusion. Your mind is deceiving you, and you're not even aware of it. When I say riding a motorcycle, I mean you're literally in an illusion. Think about it. The throttle is right under your hand. The brakes are ready to use. When danger shows up, you can immediately react with your perfect reflexes to swerve and avoid it. Or you can hit the brakes right away. That's right, isn't it? It's not. In fact, deep down, you know it's not true. And you've experienced it. But not while riding the motorcycle, while riding as a passenger. In 2006, a study on this topic was conducted at the universities of Queensland and Reading. Participants were assigned the roles of rider or passenger. When someone was in the rider's seat, they saw themselves as exceptional. They believed they could avoid every danger, make every countersteer, and handle every braking distance. Does that sound familiar? Personally, I feel that way when I'm on a motorcycle, like a MotoGP rider. But when they put the same people in the passenger seat, almost all of them began to see the person riding the motorcycle as less skilled and more likely to make mistakes than themselves. I'm sure this sounds familiar too. Don't ask how I know. They're taking the same turn at exactly the same speed. As the rider, they see it as safe. As a passenger, it's dangerous. Even if the rider were a world champion, the same mechanism would still apply. The moment they stop riding and sit in the passenger seat, the illusion ends. You realize it's actually dangerous. Think about that. But how does the brain really know the difference between the two? 2. Your brain already knows what's coming. Theirs doesn't. You're the passenger on a motorcycle. When your friend sees a curve, he's already figuring out in his head when to hit the brakes. He hits the brakes and takes the curve. Or when he sees a straight stretch, he's already decided he'll open the throttle. He weighed his options, and he twisted it. But this doesn't apply to you. Since you can't read his mind, you don't know when he'll hit the brakes or open the throttle. This is probably a simple thing with no real impact, right? I mean, at most, you'll just get a little jumpy. Not really. Findings from University College London show that when your riding partner is about to open the throttle, the motor cortex in his brain generates a signal called efference copy. This signal goes to the sensory regions and says, "You're about to feel this." And when they actually feel it, which they do because they're actually accelerating, the brain suppresses that effect, so they experience it in a way that's milder and less frightening. But as the person sitting in the back, if they don't tell you when they're going to accelerate, you'll never know. That's why when they suddenly twist the throttle, since your brain never produced that signal, it hits you before you can even register it. That's why you experience the same acceleration in a much more jarring and frightening way. The acceleration is the same, it's just the experience that's different. So next time your friend calls you a coward, you can tell them this fact. But if you want a permanent solution, we'll get to that. 3. Your ancestors built this fear. As I mentioned in the second point, he mentally plans when to hit the brakes. But this isn't just interpreted in his brain. Your friend sees the turn, decides to hit the brakes, and at that exact moment, his brain tenses his muscles, even if only by a fraction of a millimeter. Your friend doesn't notice this. He's not doing it consciously. But thanks to this, he doesn't get thrown forward during sudden braking or acceleration. If you're bouncing back and forth like a dancer every time there's a sudden brake, as you might guess, this doesn't apply to you. And this isn't just a simple game your friend can play with you. It's much deeper. So deep, in fact, that hitting the brakes just for a laugh is based on a very old and ancient mechanism. When your friend suddenly hits the brakes, you instinctively grab onto them. You don't think, you just do it. Thousands of years ago, when your ancestors climbed a tree to gather fruit while eating those incredibly green plums, they didn't have time to think if a branch might break. They either held on or, well, but your ancestors' reaction was just a split-second thing. Hold on to the tree. Done. But when you're on the back of a motorcycle, your brain is constantly exposed to this mechanism, whether it's 40 minutes or 4 hours. And with every brake, you instinctively reach out to hold on. Yet you're still getting jolted forward while your friend seems perfectly fine. I mentioned that he's braced and his muscles are tensed, and this too is based on an ancient mechanism. Think about it. Thousands of years ago, when your ancestor was about to throw a spear, their muscles had to be ready for it. They couldn't lose their balance after throwing it, so their muscles adapted to contract by millimeters. Findings from the University of Miami in 2012 show that the exact same mechanism is at work today when riding a motorcycle. You don't get thrown off during a sudden brake. You don't lose control of the bike when you suddenly open the throttle. So thanks to our ancestors for making it possible for us to enjoy this perfect two-wheeled ride. 4. Your brain gave up. You just didn't notice. Think about it. You're riding on the back of a motorcycle, you're entering a curve, and you're scared. You think be careful when passing a truck. You feel anxious when going over a pothole. But as the ride goes on, these thoughts lose their power. You're not completely relaxed, but you're not constantly thinking about it either. You're stuck in a strange state between fear and not fearing. Do you remember? Most passengers interpret this as, I'm used to it now. The fear has passed. I'm relaxed. You're not relaxed. Your brain has given up. When your brain perceives a threat, it has two options, fight or flight. As a passenger on a motorcycle, the truck, the curve, or the potholes on the road, all of them are threats to your brain. But when you're leaning into a curve, you can't run away. And there's nothing to fight against either. In situations where both are impossible, your brain triggers a very special third state, freeze. In this state, your brain stops reacting. The fear doesn't go away. You go silent. You just freeze. And you keep riding on. 5. You're scared, but you can't say it. You're leaning into a turn. You're passing another vehicle. You're scared while all this is happening. But you can't say it. Thoughts like, what if they think I'm a coward? Or what if they think I complain too much? Probably cross your mind. And even if you did say something, you wouldn't be heard anyway. The wind noise, the motorcycle's exhaust, the helmet. Remember, I told you your muscles can't tense up because you don't know when the rider is going to brake. Actually, there's a solution to this. And unlike the other points in this video, it's quite simple. But hey, before I tell you the solution, if this information is helpful, hit the like and subscribe buttons. That's the only way we can reach more riders. What's the solution? Communication. You might be thinking, are you kidding? We can't even hear each other. I'm talking about intercoms, the ones you mount inside your helmet. Studies show that on rides where intercoms are used, the passenger's stress levels drop significantly. Your rider tells you they're about to brake. You're ready. They tell you they're about to accelerate. You're ready again. This completely changes the game. Talk to your rider about it. 6. You're traveling through time. What? Yeah, you heard that right. When you're a motorcycle passenger, you're sort of traveling through time. You actually perceive time differently than the rider. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video. And if you don't fully understand this, you might lose all interest in motorcycles. The year was 2011. An experiment was conducted at York University. 15 participants would move their heads. Simple, but here's the catch. In one group, the participant would move their own head, while in the other, someone else would move it. The participant perceived their own head movement 35 milliseconds after someone else had moved it. This was measured using precision instruments. Here's how this relates to riding. When a rider makes a maneuver, leans into a turn, or accelerates, you perceive it 35 milliseconds before they do, and most people underestimate 35 milliseconds. What's the big deal, right? If you're making that mistake, you're missing a crucial truth. The rider is so in control that their brain actually perceives their own movements with a slight delay. They're that relaxed. But as a passenger, you're constantly on edge, down to the millisecond. This is what causes you to develop a fear of motorcycles. And that fear lingers even after the ride is over. So next time you're going to ride on someone's back, make sure it's a mindful rider. You don't want to lose your love for this machine. Trust me,